and have no understanding of how much butter they just ate. And so we don't know if butter is truly not associated with Parkinson's progression, or you don't know when you eat butter, and so it's not coming up in the data. People are always looking for a loophole. The number of times, and it's really funny, you go back to that good list, right? The foods associated with slower progression. Not one person in here is like, yeah, but here, no one takes issue with the more fruits, more vegetables, nuts, seeds, wines. No one argues with the protection list. As soon as I start telling you cheese, people start arguing with the data. As soon as they don't like what it says, we start here seeing resistance.
Is yogurt better than cheese?
Huh?
Yogurt better than cheese?
No, it's all just all the same. And I'm not kidding. I have been paged to have somebody ask me, what about camel milk? No goat, no sheep, no camel. I don't care if it's lactose free. I don't care if you are drinking milk from happy cows, eating grass. It doesn't matter. My data is clear. The more dairy people eat, the faster their disease progresses. There are a lot of dairy alternatives. This is cashew yogurt. But this is yogurt made from cashews. It's great. I added some honey, put it on some granola with some raisins. It was delicious. It tastes just like normal yogurt, except instead of coming from cow breast milk, it comes from cashews, right? You want to be shifting to a plant-based diet. Soda could be due to so many things. It could be the cans, it could be the aspartame, and it's associated with so many other outcomes. Just be done with the soda. I think bubbly water is fine. Fried foods, I think, are a really big deal. So what happens is when you take certain sugars and fats and heat them to a certain temperature, you screw up the shape of the molecule, and that starts to cause damage. I already said that acrolein comes from French fries. Acrylamide comes from heating up different sugars. But so basically what happens is when you heat oils to a certain amount, you get free radicals, and that misfolds cells, or misfolds proteins, right? And so you can pull some of these articles, you can go to the medical literature. There is no shortage of data. Acrolein, that's the French fry one. Acrolein-mediated neuronal cell death and alpha-synuclein aggregation, implications in Parkinson's disease. There are many articles talking about how the presence of these molecules will cause alpha-synuclein to misfold and cause aggregations. I cannot for the life of me figure out why we don't bring the data that we're publishing in the journals into clinic. It doesn't make sense. I mean, the argument is, well, we don't have a double-blind placebo-controlled trial that says if you stop eating French fries, you'll be better off. I'm not going to wait for that trial. Right now, there is a whole body of literature that says acrolein is associated with alpha-synuclein aggregation, and my advice is minimize exposure to acrolein. Okay? Beef. This is World Parkinson Congress. I told you I do what I have no rules on vacation. After I gave a talk on why you shouldn't eat beef, one of my patients took me out to a Japanese steakhouse. So again, beef has been linked to all these other diseases. I just tried this Beyond Beef for the first time last week. It was great. I made a great pasta dish, and I put the Beyond Beef in it. It was delicious. For whatever reason, chicken is very clearly associated with faster progression. Turkey is not. It could be that these birds are different. It could be that not enough people are eating turkey for us to catch it in the data, that it probably will eventually be just as bad, but not enough people are eating it, so we don't have enough data to see that association yet. It could also have something to do with farming practices. It might be that the chicken farms are less healthy than the turkey farms, and it could have something to do with food prep. No one does drive-through deep-fried turkey, and we do drive-through deep-fried chicken. So it could have something to do with food prep. Pork is interesting. It actually was especially relevant for non-motor symptoms. It wasn't as strongly associated with motor progression as the rest of the foods, but it was very strongly associated with non-motor symptoms. The more pork anybody ate, the worse their fatigue, sleep, bowels, that kind of stuff. Pasta is interesting, and it's interesting because bread was not associated with faster progression. what pasta was. And so when I've been talking to my colleagues about it, I have a couple ideas as to what that could be. The Environmental Working Group has a list of the foods that are highest in glyphosate. There's some reason to think that that might be causing some gastrointestinal inflammation. Pasta is on the list of foods highest in glyphosate, so it could have nothing to do with the wheat, but that there's actually something happening in the processing of the wheat. The other thing that several of my colleagues have said to me is they think it has nothing to do with the pasta, but the pasta is a delivery system for cheese and canned tomatoes. And so it might not be the pasta that's the problem, but what we put on the pasta that's the problem. So the things that we didn't have enough data to say one way or the other. We asked, and bread, beans, beer, liquor, eggs, turkey, and butter are not associated with Parkinson's progression. And again, I don't know if it's because they're not associated with progression or not enough of you have joined the study for us to have that data. So in terms of how to eat, I cannot stress enough the importance of eating with appreciation. Food scarcity is a real problem. I think it ties into the talks about mindfulness. Doesn't matter if you are religious or atheist or what, you can take a minute to be appreciative of the food that you are about to eat. We have food deserts where people do not have access to food. The only thing that they have close to them is a 7-Eleven, right? And that's what they have to choose from. And with anticipation, right? Tease yourself. The majority of your stomach acid, your digestive juices, are produced in anticipation of the meal. And you know what kicks them into high gear? As soon as you start smelling food. The more you tease yourself, the more you smell, the better your digestive function. Weight loss is a huge problem for a lot of people with Parkinson's. Do you know the better your sense of smell, the more weight you gain when you eat?
And if you lost your sense of smell?
If you've lost your sense of smell, retrain it. There are 2 studies that show that people with Parkinson's can, in fact, retrain their sense of smell. There is a company in the UK, for $25 you can order this cute little kit, and you train yourself to be able to identify clove versus rose. And the second study was even more awesome because it showed as sense of smell improves, so does quality of life improve proportionally, right? So you can retrain it. I tell the story, but I was making dinner one night, and my son had a couple friends over, and they started to go outside to play on the trampoline, and I heard one of the boys stop them and say, "Hey, don't go through the kitchen. Oliver's mom will make you huff the rosemary." Because every time they'd run through the kitchen, I'd make them come over and take a big sniff of my herbs I was chopping, right? And so you want to do that. That's part of the reason I even asked the questions about cooking your own food. I do think the person standing over the cutting board, crying from onions, chopping the garlic, is getting olfactory exposure to antioxidants that you don't get when you do drive-through fast food, right? Family is a big problem. There are a lot of people who, just because you have Parkinson's, doesn't mean that everyone in your family wants to eat a Parkinson's-friendly type of diet, right? And it's a whole different level of stress when you have to make several different meals to accommodate everybody in the family. So, we try to do things like tacos, where you can kind of mix and match what you want, or build on options. But really, I think once you kind of come around and find a few recipes the family likes, one trick that I do, especially with my kids, is every Sunday we do our grocery shopping, and I make them go through cookbooks and pick a food we have never had before, a meal we've never had, and we go get those ingredients. And I will tell you, people in the family are so much more open-minded to a new food if they are the one who chose it. If I present them with something that is foreign, there's resistance. When they decide that we're going to have, Thai curry of some sort, they're actually much more excited to try it, right? Because they had a say in bringing it to you. So involve the family in meal planning. Don't just plop your new health food down in front of them. And permit flexibility. You know, like I said, the reason we behave at home is so that we can have a little bit of leeway when we go out, when you're a guest in somebody's house, or when you travel. So you find the rule and the balance that works for you. I do not think it needs to be 100%. I am a B+ type of person, and that is totally okay with me. There are a lot of you who are A+ people, and that's okay too. But it truly, what our data says is the more you eat those protective foods, the slower the disease progresses. You get out what you put in. So how much do I need to be disciplined? How much can I cheat? How much do I need to give this? It really depends on how you're doing right now and how far you are into your disease. I'm doing some other work with early detection. Right now, like I said earlier, by the time you're diagnosed, you have this disease 10, 20 years. So if you were just diagnosed a couple months ago and your score at an average is about 580, you can make some of these changes, start exercising differently, start eating differently, maybe taking a couple supplements. And our data suggests that you can easily cut the rate of progression in half. You can cut the slope in half. And that means quite a bit to somebody who's going to live with this disease for another 25 years. Even a 50% reduction in slope can make a big difference. If you've had this disease for 20 years and you already say my quality of life kind of stinks, a 50% reduction in slope is not going to make a huge difference, right? And so you have to pick and choose your battles. If you're 95 years old and the only joy you get in this life is ice cream, and really it's not affecting your symptoms, we're only talking about its impact on progression, honestly my answer is eat your ice cream. But if you're 50 years old, you're recently diagnosed, you're crazy if you keep eating ice cream. It's a game changer over the long run. And if we can start to get to this early, when people are losing their sense of smell, when they have constipation but no motor symptoms, if your kids can start eating this way, look at what a 50% reduction in slope means. It means instead of this person being diagnosed in 20 years, that person buys themselves an extra 25 years. It'll be 45 years instead of 20 by the time they're even symptomatic enough to be diagnosed. It is stuff like that that is truly opening the doors to prevention for the next generation. Okay? Social health as a nutrient. I've already talked about this. This isn't just about food. We are asking about several hundred variables. The 4 most guaranteed links to progression in order: people who are lonely, people who are poor, a bad night's sleep, and lack of exercise. All 4 of those are more potent predictors than diet. So when we're trying to pick and choose our battles, I would way rather you go out and make some new friends and sneak in a little bit of butter than to stay home and eat the vegan diet Laurie told me to eat, right? So I just need you to put it in context. We're not being militant here. We're just trying to play the game based on the data we have. What these data say is that we ask people, true or false, I am lonely. People who said true to that statement, let me say it this way. Being lonely is worse for you than 7 days a week of exercise is good for you. That is a big deal. And I love all my clever patients who are like, can I just make some more friends and not exercise? Right? That's the kind of research I'm excited to do, right? So what we did is we looked at people's symptoms over time, right? This is the symptom score. This is on the ProPD scale. This is the typical Parkinson's disease severity of people who say, I'm not lonely. These are the Parkinson's symptoms of people who are lonely. We need to develop, I don't have an answer here, but we need some sort of, these events are gold, right? And we need to bring this home with us. I don't know if we can develop some sort of Parkinson's partnership program like the way AA has a sponsor. We need the community to figure out how to keep each other connected. This is not a prescription I can write, your movement disorder can write. We can't tell you to go here at 4 friends, call me in the morning. You know, we need you to be reaching out to each other, to your neighbors, helping someone less fortunate than you. One of the most brilliant ideas I've had from one of my patients is really socially isolated. He doesn't have many friends. What he does is he goes 3 days a week to the elementary school down the street from him, and he helps first and second graders who are behind in reading learn to read. He is fulfilled. He is changing those kids' lives, and they don't judge him. It's voice exercise for him. He's getting to do some speech therapy. There's no judgment. It's brilliant. It's free, and he's giving to his community. There are ways for you to satisfy loneliness that don't involve other patients with Parkinson's. So there are a ton of community resources. This food for lunch today was amazing. Alita's sample table out there was fascinating. Every one of those recipes on that list I stand behind. I hope you all took one of those flyers. They're great resources. She's a great resource for the community. Use the resources that we have. This is a one-page handout that kind of summarizes the best of the data that we have right now. This study was only on people with idiopathic Parkinson's disease. What we did is we took the 2,000 people who have enrolled in our study so far, and we only looked at the 1,600 and some who said, I have a diagnosis of idiopathic Parkinson's disease. And this is kind of the one-page summary of the foods associated with faster and slower progression. In my clinic, I turn this into a refrigerator magnet, and I give it to all my patients so that every time they go to the refrigerator door, I'm haunting them and reminding them what they're supposed to be doing. But it's a nice little summary, and that's probably the best I have in terms of the aggregation of data. I'm super far behind, so let me just do this real quick. Things that interfere with iron, levodopa. Iron, which we've already talked about, is in a lot of cereals. Protein is horrible. I have been doing nutrition and Parkinson's for a very long time. It took me so long to learn how severe protein interacts with levodopa. I knew it. I told all my patients, take your medicine a half hour before or 1 hour after a meal. That's not good enough. There are so many sources of protein I didn't realize. I had no idea how much protein pasta had in it. I had no idea how much protein guava has. I looked up some different breads, trying to look at the difference. I was shocked. A piece of white bread has 2 grams of protein. A bagel has 11. That is the difference between your meds working and not. And it's not just about how much protein is in the food, it's what type of protein it is. There's this neat little thing going around Facebook right now showing how long different foods stay in your stomach. Vegetables are out in 30, 40 minutes. Water is immediate. Potatoes take an hour, nuts take an hour, 180 minutes. Meat can take 3 or 4 hours. So it depends on what type of protein you have in your stomach is the determinant of how long you need to wait before you take your meds. That's why the inhaled levodopa is a game changer for a lot of people. Low stomach acid is a huge problem. For 40 to 60% of people with Parkinson's have impaired stomach acid production. It's a huge problem, and so I don't think it's on here. There it is, right here. There are 2 really neat studies that we don't use enough, but because people with Parkinson's have such low stomach acid, and guess what? You need stomach acid to activate levodopa, right? And you're low in stomach acid, so what do? Well, the first researchers asked people to take their levodopa with 30 mils of lemon juice. Guess what? It worked better. Their meds work better. They have less rigidity, faster gait, more fluidity of their movement, reduction in tremor. The next group asked people to look at ascorbic acid, like one of those powdered packs of vitamin C. They took a half pack. 30% improvement in levodopa reaches the bloodstream if you take your levodopa with a little lemon juice or vitamin C. Other patients have told me that anything acidic works, that's calm magnesium powder, vinegar. As long as it's an acid, it will kind of help. In terms of drug interactions, this is a pretty serious one. Rasagiline and selegiline, I think, is a fabulous drug. I didn't get into it, but of all of our data, our data does say that people who are taking rasagiline, Azilic, have a slower rate of Parkinson's progression. There's reason to believe that there might be a little disease modification that happens as a result of that drug. I think it's a great drug. I use it. But it can cause a horrible problem called serotonin syndrome if you take it with one of these over-the-counter mood or sleep aids that include St. John's wort or 5-HTP. So you really have to be care of those interactions. And then the last thing that I want to say is not all interactions are negative, right? This is a beautiful study. They looked at primates, and they gave primates levodopa-induced dyskinesia, right? And what they did is they gave the primates with Parkinson's disease 5 grams of DHA fish oil or placebo. And what they found is within 30 days, there was a 50% reduction in dyskinesia, right? And so I wanted to try that in my patients. I presented this as a poster at one of the movement disorder meetings. This was a blinded assessment, but what we saw is before and after, we could only get 4 grams, and 1 tablespoon of this fancy oil was 4 grams of fish oil instead of the 5 they used. But we saw about a 40% reduction in the levodopa-induced dyskinesia within the month. About supplements, there are 4 supplements that have been linked to slower Parkinson's progression in our data. Our data says people who report taking glutathione, fish oil, CoQ10, and turmeric, or curcumin supplements, are doing better than people not taking those supplements. Glutathione, fish oil, CoQ10, and turmeric, or curcumin. Before the question comes up, I've already gotten it. Intranasal versus oral. Our data says intranasal glutathione is about twice as effective as oral glutathione, but it is 10 times more expensive and it's a lot more inconvenient. So for most of my patients, I tell them to take the cheap oral stuff and make a couple extra friends. So in summary, nurture your social health and connections. It is the most pivotal part of this treatment plan. Daily exercise, 5 days is better than 4, 4 is better than 3, 6 is better than 5, right? More is better. Sleep, protect your sleep like your life depends on it. Do not watch 4 hours of movies and keep yourself up till midnight. When the sun sets and the temperature cools, turn off the electronics, go to bed. I had a calculus professor who was 90 years old when he was teaching me, and he'd get up and play tennis at 7 a.m. every morning before 8 o'clock calculus class. And I can remember he asked one day, do you have any questions? And we were all these tired 19-year-olds. He said, someone in the class asked, how do you have this much energy? And he said, I have one rule in life. I live my life so fully that if I'm not asleep before my head hits the pillow at night, it means I haven't lived a full day. Right? So he is out playing tennis and chopping wood and whatever it takes to ensure he exercises so much that he can't wait to close his eyes and get a good night's sleep. A plant-based diet, and identify and correct any underlying nutritional deficiencies, and I'm including dopamine insufficiency in that. Thank you. So now I think we have a panel where the other docs and I can debate and argue whose strategy for anxiety and depression and who, no, I'm kidding. I think the point in our having this conversation about how each of us treat different symptoms differently, I think our hope is that you realize that there's not as much difference or more fiber, more exercise. And so I think the point of this next session is both to introduce you to the diversity and all the ways that there are to manage different symptoms, as well as have you realize that there isn't as much difference between our philosophical approaches as we might think.